Up to Revelation chapter 21. I deeply appreciate Kerry covering last week while I was out. He got us through the first 7 verses. We're going to read them in a moment and just keep moving since he covered those. But one of the things we've looked as we're getting to the end of this book, we got 2 classes left. One of the things is we remember what happened to the beast and the false prophet. They ended up in the lake of fire. Chapter 19 tells us that. And then we found chapter 20, we found the devil. And he was bound for 1,000 years, but it had only one purpose. It didn't keep him from doing his work on the earth. What was the purpose? To not deceive the nations. The devil was deceiving all the nations to rally against the saints. And they were destroying the saints. And so God said, it's enough. You'll be bound for 1,000 years. And it's to keep you from deceiving the nations again. But after the 1,000 years, what would happen? He's released from being bound those years. And what does he immediately go and do?
Deceive.
He goes right back to deceiving the nations again. And then he tells us that when he deceived the nations this second time, they began to attack where? Remember? So they began their attack against the saints again and the holy city. Both of them. And God's not going to stand for it this time, because once they start attacking the saints again and this holy city, and we don't know what that is yet. Maybe you had an intro to it. But God's going to put a stop to it. And so there's, at the end of chapter 20, there's this judgment scene. And the judgment scene begins with, first off, I'm going to deal with the devil. And he's going straight to the lake of fire. It's over. That's his eternity setting. And then there were these books opened. And all the people, and we're talking the ungodly, are all judged from the books. And if the names weren't found in the book of life, where did they end up?
Lake of fire.
Lake of fire. That's the judgment scene. Boom. Now when we hit chapter 21, he's going to explain this beloved city. What most people do is that they take chapter 21 because chapter 20 ends with an end time judgment. They think chapter 21 is an end time judgment in heaven. And that's not the case. And we'll see that as we go through. Look at verse 1. And like I said, we're going to just kind of read down through these. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. So, what was the first heaven and earth? Do you know? It would be the Roman nation over all the earth. You know, and how bad of damage did they do? Horrible damage to people of God. Now we've got the end of all of that new heaven and, or the old heaven and earth, first heaven and earth. And there's no longer a sea in this, what's coming. Why?
No beast.
The beast is what came up out of the sea. So guess what we're not going to have on this new one? There's not going to be a sea. He's describing, not literal, but how things are being controlled and handled. So, the first heaven and earth are past. and there is no longer any sea. Now, I want to tell you this. The first 8 verses of chapter 21, John is describing what he saw. He's not telling you what it meant. This is what he saw as he goes through that. And he'll begin to explain it in verse 9. Let's keep moving. Look at verse 2. And I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. Now what comes down? A New Jerusalem. It's coming down from where? From heaven. Heaven doesn't come down out of itself. We're not talking about heaven. The first heaven and earth has passed away. He dealt a blow to Rome by dealing with all of the beasts, the kings, and the nations, and the kings of the other nations. All that's gone. Now we have this new Jerusalem. And I appreciated Kerry last week because he brought in this idea, and it's right. There's 2 words for the word new. And the word used here is superior. It's superior. So now there's going to be a new Jerusalem, a superior Jerusalem. Who lived in the old Jerusalem, by the way? Jews. Yeah. Then we got something superior. And he calls it a new Jerusalem. And how does he describe that in verse 2? As a bride adorned for her husband. As a bride made ready. Now he's going to explain what all this means. And then in verse 3, when he hears this loud voice, this tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them. And God himself will be among them. Does that make you think of anything? You remember Moses? When he brought the children of Israel out of bondage? What did God tell Moses to build? I want you to build a tabernacle because I want to dwell among my people. Same thing. And so God would be their God, they would be his people, and God would be among them. So here's this New Jerusalem coming down. Looks like this bride made ready for her husband. Keep going, verse 4. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning, or crying, or pain. The first things have passed away. What happened in the first things? What happened in the first heaven and earth? Was there a lot of pain? Oh, was there a lot of crying? See, so you have all of these things, and guess what won't be? There won't be death like under that first one. When those kings began to rule and they began to persecute the people of God, I mean, people were having to flee for their lives. And Jesus had to tell the people, be faithful till death. You got to live through this thing. Remember at the writing of this book, this hadn't happened yet. They were going to have to face all of these things. But now he's giving an end time, and he's trying to show the people, look at what's coming. I need you to be faithful till death because of the good that's coming. I'm going to bring down and I'm going to tabernacle among you. I'm going to be your God. You'll be my people. I will be among you. You won't have to worry about what all those other people did to you. No, that's not going to be anymore. The first things, he said, have passed away. Continue, verse 5. And he who sits on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. There's that word again, superior. I am making all things new. And he said, right, for these words are faithful and true. Why does he say that? Why would he say, these words are faithful and true? Wants them to know. You can count on it. The first things are gone. I've dealt a blow. I'm bringing down this new place to tabernacle among men, among my people. I'll be their God. I'll live among them. I'm going to wipe away every tear from their eyes. I'm going to deal a blow to death that they were causing on my people on earth. I'm going to do all of these. And you write this down because it's faithful and true. Now, he hasn't told us what this New Jerusalem is. John just sees it coming down as this bride made ready for her husband. Continue on. Verse 6. Then he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the springs of water of life without cost. It's done. Do you thirst? Do you want? And what is he going to do? If you want, where can you go get a drink? The water of life. We don't know what that is. Chapter 22 is going to explain that statement. John's just writing what he sees, what he hears. That's all he's doing. Verse 7. He who overcomes will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. One huge word. What is it? Overcomes. Isn't that what he told 6 of the 7 congregations back in chapters 2 and 3? If you overcome, you will gain this. If you overcome, I'm going to share this with you. Now he's telling them, they haven't gone through it yet. This is all in their future, near future. This book, as we've always stated, how far in the future was it? Soon to take place, for the time is near. In their day and time, first 3 verses of chapter 1. We've hit that so many times, but I want you to know this book is over. Now, as he gets through, they have to go through all of these difficulties. Now he's trying to assure them, this is the outcome in the end. Some of you are going to have to die. Be faithful till death. I'll give you a crown of life. Those that survive it, what's it going to be like? Especially after you read about this beast and the horrible things he was doing and what the devil was doing and making an image to this beast and getting the mark of the beast. You can't buy or sell. You know, you're going to die. If you end up coming through it all, and there would be many, what would you need to know? What kind of assurance would you need that it would be like?
Know that God is waiting for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God is there. And I'm bringing to earth, I've dealt a blow to all that first. It's gone. Now there's coming a new heaven and earth, and I'm going to bring this new Jerusalem down on it. And I'm going to take care of my people. Continue on, verse 8. But for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Are there going to be ungodly people survive it?
Apparently so.
Absolutely. If we're talking about heaven, do you think that the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable people and immoral people and liars, you think they're going to be in heaven too? He's letting them know there's going to be this kind of people left. And notice, will be, future tense. Their part will be where? In the lake of fire. So, knowing that, verse 9. Anybody have a comment? I know we went quick. Any questions? All right, let's keep moving. Verse 9. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here. I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." Now, what's this angel about to do? I'm going to show you the wife, the bride of the Lamb. The book has done this all the way through. Every time you get to some vivid picture, and what does that mean? I'll explain it to you, he says. He's done it through the whole book. And now we see this new Jerusalem made ready as a bride for her husband. That's all he stated. Now the angel said, "Let me tell you who this is." Explain. Verse 10. "And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God." Now, I want to make one quick point here in verse 10. What is he about to show? What does he call it? The holy city, Jerusalem, that's coming down out of heaven from God. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm going to. Verse 11. No, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. I got you. Most of the time when we talk about the bride of the Lamb, what do we think of? The church. Now, if we insert the church here, what already exists on earth? The church already existed. He wrote 2 chapters to the churches. So it looks like it has to be something else other than the church, and I'm just throwing that out. We'll see as we go. Verse 11. "Having the glory of God. Her brilliance was like a very costly stone, a stone of crystal clear jasper. It had a great and high wall and 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and names were written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel." This Jerusalem that came down from heaven, what does it have? What does he say? It has the glory of God. Keep that in mind, first part of verse 11. What is glory?
Displays the awesomeness of God.
It has everything to do about God's splendor, God's greatness being illumined, God's holiness. That's glory. When we sing or we read about the glory of God, it's always about this splendor that strikes you, that's supposed to strike you. Well, this city has God's glory. And it is a striking city that he describes. It's not literal. He's trying to use pictures to explain to us this is what it's like. It ought to strike you with awe. And he begins as this very costly stone, crystal clear jasper. I'll let Carrie share that with you because he's got a piece of jasper on his desk. And then he begins there in verse 12. How many gates? Gates are 12. How many names? 12. And who are they? Why in the world would you have gates? Why in the world would you have even a wall? Look at verse 13. There were 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. And the wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the lambs. So, on the gates, there were the names of the 12 tribes. On the foundation, what's written? The 12 apostles. This is again the same things he's done all through the book. You've got on the gates these 12 tribes of Israel. You've got on the foundation the 12 apostles. If you remember back earlier in chapter 14, there were 144,000 people before the throne. Who were they? They were Jews. Right after that, then there was a multitude no one could count before the throne of God. Who were they? They were the Gentiles. Now we got the 12 tribes written on these gates, the Jews, and now we got the foundation, the 12 apostles. Who began to take that gospel message out into the world? The apostles. So you got again the Jew and the Gentile there. You know, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20, he tells us there that the apostles are the ones that laid the foundation. The apostles and prophets. And so now in this city, you've got these walls. You've got these gates. And what is he describing? I'll let you tell me.
The teachings of the apostles are what
The
holds.
teaching what, sir?
The teaching of the apostles is what holds this whole thing up.
Yes, okay. Teaching of the apostles holds the whole thing up.
And the 12 tribes are kind of responsible to some degree for our ability to enter in. It was set up.
Okay.
12 tribes.
The 12 tribes. 12 tribes being Israel, that's the original starting of the whole plan of God. All right? Now we're looking at this New Jerusalem came down, and here's what these gates are. They got these pearls. You know, how many times we sing about the pearly gates? You know what? Those pearly gates, it's not about heaven. It's about this Jerusalem that's on earth that has the glory of God in it. We'll let him continue to tell us. Verse 15. The one who spoke with me had a gold measuring rod to measure the city and its gates and its wall. The city is laid out as a square, and its length is as great as the width. And he measured the city with a rod 1,500 miles. Its length and width and height are equal. First off, a measuring rod. This book was always something being measured out. You go back into chapter 11, and you got these 2 witnesses, and they were told to measure the temple and those who dwell in it. I'll give you something on the side for you to do. In Ezekiel, chapter 40, chapter 40 through chapter 43, Ezekiel is given a measuring rod and told to do the same thing. And in Ezekiel, he tells us there was 2 purposes to measuring things when you're giving this. First, it's to stress God's holiness. It's not just common that you can just go up and measure like you're cutting wood. It was to measure the holiness of God. Secondly, it was to stress this is God's glory. So you have to recognize what is being in place by God. His holiness, his glory. the glory of God dwelt in this one. And it had these walls on it. And these walls were laid out. And how big were they? 1,500 miles. It was a square. Some versions may use the term furlong. Now, furlong is 1/8 of a mile. So, all of this comes to 1,500 miles. 1/8 of a mile, a furlong would do that. And we're going to see why in a moment. So, you got 1,500 miles long, 1,500 miles wide, and 1,500 miles high. How astounding is that? Well, I did a little calculating to try to impress us. Go ahead, Chuck.
If you're standing at one edge of it, you're not going to be able to see the other edge.
Right.
You're not going to be able to really comprehend how big this is.
Absolutely. Yes, you won't be able to see. Now, this came down. It's glory of God. And it's 1,500, 1,500, 1,500, 1,500. I did this because I was in Buffalo, okay? From Buffalo, New York, down to the tip of Miami is just about 1,500 miles. From Buffalo, New York, to Fargo, North Dakota, 1,500 miles. From Fargo, North Dakota, all the way down to the tip to Galveston, Texas, 1,500 miles. This city, mapping it off like that, is over half of the United States size. Just to try to impress you how big this is. And so, we're not speaking literal. He's letting you know, and Chuck said it well, that when you stand at the corner, you're not going to be able to see. What's he impressing with this? What's this? He's impressing the size of it. What's he trying to get his people to see? Here's the glory, here's the holiness, here's the brilliance of God. And this new Jerusalem that's going to be superior to anything that ever was has come down to man, and it's filled with the presence of God. Let him keep explaining. And by the way, he who overcomes, this city is only for the overcomers. Keep that in mind. Look at verse 17. And he measured the wall. And he measured the wall 72 yards, according to human measurements, which are also angelic measurements. Whoa, 72 yards, the wall. How big is that? That's 216 feet.
It's 144 cubics.
Yeah, 216 feet. This thing is huge. Being 216 feet. And you know what? That's this bride that's made ready by the Lord. He's describing her. Continue on. Verse 17. And he measured its wall 72 yards according to human measurements, which are also angelic measurements. Interesting. John's in the Spirit. So he's being let known angelic measurements are the same as human measurements. Just for whatever that means, that's in there. Verse 18. The material of the wall was jasper. And the city was pure gold, like clear glass. You can't understand these. It's just impressive. But he's trying to show the impressiveness of God's glory. Verse 19. The foundation stones of the city wall were adorned with every kind of precious stone. The first foundation stone was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, the seventh chrysolite, eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. Now, question real quick. What does that strike you as?
Brilliant.
Really brilliant, really beauty, the beauty of it. How many of our songs about heaven written like this? Streets of gold, pure like glass. Is he talking about heaven? It's come down out of heaven. And it's going to be a tabernacle on earth for God's people. And it's got these huge walls. And they're clear. And it goes up 216 feet tall. The enormity. This is what came from God. If you remember, in Revelation chapter 5, verse 11, one of the things that were promised is his people would be a kingdom of priests, and they would reign where? On the earth. The old is all gone away, because that was what was causing the problem for all of God's people. And God has now replaced the old with a new heaven and a new earth. And this city as a bride adorned for her husband. And here's the glory, the grandeur, the glory of God is shining out in it to be among men. Continue on. By the way, this city is 250 times higher than Mount Everest in the Himalayas. That's incredible. That's just a tidbit I want to throw in there with you too. So, using these pictures, he's trying to get us to see the glory of God. Continue on, verse 22. I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb are its temple. Oh, why is there no temple? You don't need one. You know why? This place is God's dwelling among man. Let him finish it out. See, we're talking about the presence of God. We're talking about the presence of Jesus dwelling on this earth among man. Keep going, verse 23. And the city has no need of the sun or of the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God has illumined its lamp as a lamp. It's a self-illuminating city from what? From God. It's God and the glory of the Lamb in this deal. Verse 24. And the nations, what's still here? Nations. We're talking about heaven. We're not talking about nations. Nations wouldn't be here. And the nations will walk by its light. And the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. What is the purpose of this city on earth now? It's giving light to whom? The nations of the earth. And the kings that are on the earth, they're not going to glorify themselves anymore. No, they're going to bring their glory into this. Question. In verse 24, where he says the nations will walk by its light, there's some versions that says nations which are saved. That is not in the Greek. This doesn't say nations which are saved. We're talking about there's nations that are ungodly on the earth. This city, huge city, comes down and it rests on the earth from God. And it's made up of all these Jewish things, all these Gentile things. They got these gates. You see the next chapter? He's going to tell us. He's going to tell the overcomers, that is. You better make sure you get to enter into the gate. Because the other nations aren't going to be a part of this. This is going to be all God's dwelling. Verse 25. In the daytime, for there will be no night there, its gates will never be closed. And they will bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. What's going to be in control? Who's going to be in control? Verse 27. And nothing unclean, and no one who practices abomination and lying shall ever come into it, but only those for whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. Who's not getting to be a part of this one? Yeah, the nations and all these ungodly folk, but you know what they're going to be able to see when they look at it? They're going to be able to see the glory of God from it. God's ruling this thing. But they're on the outside looking in. They're not a part of it. This is only for the overcomers. This is what he wants for them. There's nations and kings. They're not a part of it, but they're going to benefit from the light of it. And this is what's going to be the subject from God for all the people that are left over. All right, have we made sense? Where I come from, this means yes, and this means no. Have we made sense? It's really, it gets so messed up because people want to jump immediately and say, this is heaven. It's not heaven because you got these nations around. Then they'll say, well, this thing has to be the church. The church already exists. God is making everything new. There's going to be a superior environment.
As the New Jerusalem.
The New Jerusalem, yes. So there's a superior environment that God brings down. And as they are listening to this book being read, they get to the end and they can see, well, I need to be an overcomer. I better not give in to that beast. I better not give in to that false prophet. I better not give in to what the other nations say and what they're doing to us. I better focus on the Lord and the Lord alone.
Is there a significance, a reason he uses Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem, versus the Old Jerusalem?
Well, yeah, the Old Jerusalem is, Rome came and destroyed the Old Jerusalem back in 70 AD, okay? Now we're going to have this new environment. Nobody's touching this one. You got walls that are so long and nobody getting in. Walls are so tall, nobody climbing over, and they're not breaching these. And the illumination of God is coming out from it to all the people to see. All right. You're going to see the tree of life next week. We're going to see that and see how all of this ties together in chapter 22. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.